everyone, today we are taking a look at the Tinyhawk 3 HD. It's a little starter whoop, as in the previous case of the Freestyle. You can buy this just by itself if that's something that interests you. It also comes in a kit that comes with a set of HD goggles, that's HDZero, as well as their E6 radio. This is all running ExpressLRS, which is a good thing because many of our veterans will know we suffered with FrSky D8 mode for far too long. You may have seen my previous video, which I go into how someone that wears glasses like myself can adopt box goggles, whether they're these or something else. I'll link that video down in the video description below about how you can do a light modification for those of us with less than perfect vision. As I said in that video, this is probably the most flexible set of box goggles that I have used. And there's something else to kind of bring out in all this, especially on the starter package side. If you look at the cost of the bind and fly kit to get involved with HDZero, I'm seeing on their price that with this quad, $279.99. Whereas this quad all by itself, gotta look a little bit, it's almost $160 just for the quad itself. So if you add up all the pricing, this is by far the cheapest way to get involved in HDZero for sure. And for those that are starting out, this is a very simple way of getting started with FPV as well as HD. Oftentimes with our HD video transmissions and cameras, there's firmware. You have to fuss with that and make sure they're on the same version. With even ExpressLRS, there's binding, which can be problematic for your first time through. None of that with this. You don't even need to plug it into a computer. They've got the radio labeled here with the red stickers and all the different modes. So it's kind of dead simple. Charge up a battery, plug it into the quad, turn these items on, whoop, off you go. The motors on the Tinyhawk are 0802s, second iteration, 15,000 kV. Flight controller right here with the USB-C port is an F411 with a 6 amp ESC on this. It is 1 and 2S integrated, but this is designed to just run one single 1S battery. With the HDZero connector, which is not my favorite connector, but you can buy other batteries. They don't have to be branded as Emax. The bottom board here is the HDZero 1S Lite board, and the FPV camera is the HDZero Nano Lite. The props on the aforementioned motors are Emax Avon props. You'll find these listed on some sites at 2.5 inch props. They are not 2.5 inch. On my calipers, I'm getting 40 millimeters for that prop size, and they are called the Avia Tinyhawk props. It weighs just over 37 grams, and with the 650 milliamp 1S battery, it weighs a hair over 52 grams. Gonna start off with the indoor flight, which is my kind of preferred way of flying. I like to fly inside. I do have a nice sized house with nice flight lines. I think the first thing I have to talk about is I am flying it as it came. I didn't go through and make any customizations. I'm not doing any sort of image stabilization or anything to the DVR footage. Take the DVR footage out, put it into the editor. I do use a secondary camera to record flight audio. I bring that together in the editor so that you can hear the quad in all of its glory and you can tell what it's doing. Now, as far as the quad goes, this Tinyhawk is going to be kind of appropriate for someone who's wanting to get started and who doesn't have a lot of experience. I would always encourage someone to use a computer and use an FPV simulator like Velocidrone or whatever you find that suits your fancy to get kind of familiar with the controls of quadcopters. Even if you've got a little bit of RC experience, it can be a little bit disorienting. I am flying in acro mode. That's why in the lower left you see it say air mode when you're not in angle or horizon. When you are in acro, you're not in angle or horizon. You're in air mode, which can be on all the time. Although you don't need to have air mode on. Matter of fact, for beginners purposes, you might want to turn that off. But that is something that you would have to do through the beta flight configuration process. You'd have to download the application. You got to connect USB to your computer, and then you got to go in and turn that off. I believe it's on the configuration page. Also, I am flying this as it came on R1 at 25 milliwatts. That is the lowest VTX setting, so you see some breakup from time to time throughout my house. We do have kind of open floor plan. It is stock construction of traditional drywall as well as wood. So if you live in an apartment that is largely concrete, the reception isn't going to be anything like this, especially if you have smaller openings to your home. You know, those airwaves, they just can't flow through every sort of wall, so you're going to have to get those. Your reception The genesis is your reception might be different depending upon where you fly. Environment's always a big deal. But back to this being appropriate for someone who's getting started, because of the fact that for a whoop, it's very heavy, and it's really not a high performer. So that will limit your abilities to grow with it, but it also limits how much trouble you'll get yourself into inside. So it won't respond as quickly, you won't get out of shape, you won't be wobbling back and forth quite so much. It will be a little bit easier to control because it does have more weight and less power, but it's not going to be something that you're going to say, you know, in a year and you consistently fly it every week. I would expect the bell curve of most people who are trying this out to probably want something that is a little bit more powerful, and we'll get to see the lack of performance more so outside. So this is obviously prop protected, so it is safer. So if you do bump into something or someone or a family pet, or you hit a rug or you hit a couch or something like that, it's very unlikely to tear things up with the props being covered by the prop protection. And the Tinyhawk itself, the frame, has been known to be quite a durable frame. So as you bonk into stuff or crash, you probably won't likely break it all that much. We have had some breakages in past iterations, but hard to say if that will happen on this one as well. Our flight ended. We got 3 minutes and 30 seconds. This is a flight that I did in angle mode, and you'll see that I got way longer flights. So there's something to be had for angle mode. Even if you don't like that mode, you can get more flight time. And again, doesn't like being close to the goggles. This is our outside flight, and as you can see up there at the top, my trees are moving around. We do have wind. 9-mile-an-hour wind, which is actually relatively low, but we do have wind gusts that go up to 16 miles an hour on this day, and we may see that. Starting off here in angle mode, but we'll be switching shortly over to acro mode. Angle mode, if you're not familiar, it's always trying to level itself out. This isn't GPS hold or altitude hold, anything like that. It's just always trying to go level based upon previous calibration. And now, if you've crashed this a bunch, you may find that that calibration is off and it needs to be recalibrated at the desk, which does involve, again, the Betaflight application, USB connection, and setting it on a very, very level surface. You really want to have it like a level to the earth sort of surface. Here we're changing over to air mode, where we can get a lot more angle of attack in our flight. And it's also, for me and my hands, smoother. So it's much more natural as well. But you'll see I'm going to do a fair bit of just flat flying. Low pass along the fence, which is one of my favorite things to do regardless of quad that I'm flying. But we'll eventually go to the phases where I start to do some punch outs to test the thrust. And as you can see there, as we get to 100% throttle, we do get some vibrations in the camera, and it doesn't climb very quickly. So it's not a high performer. Again, this is geared towards those that are wanting to get involved in FPV, get started in FPV, maybe your first quad or very likely your first quad, and you're just wanting to cruise around and you're wanting something that has prop protection so you're not likely to hurt others or your furniture if you're flying inside, or if you're flying around your family or something of that nature, you won't hurt them because the props are encompassed around the external edges of those props. This won't be a full flight, this is just a partial flight, but this was one of the flights that I had outside in a lower wind. I had a number of days where I had this. I've actually had this a while, and the wind just wasn't calm enough to fly this outside. That's another caution, is that if you tend to have high winds and you're in big open spaces, that this is going to get pushed around quite a bit, and due to its lack of performance and overall thrust, you probably find it more difficult and challenging to fly around. Of course, close proximity for something like this is also very challenging. It can be fun and challenging as well. I like to do a fair bit of close proximity. This flight will be ending here shortly as I just do a few more passes. So not a high performer, but appropriate for those wanting to get started as a beginner, especially at the price point and get involved in HDZero. I should also call out that in the lower right, I am flying in race band 1, but I'm flying at 200 milliwatts, which is the maximum milliwatts for this VTX. So I think if you were to suffer any sort of damage to this quad, it's probably going to be one of these little spurs down here. And I don't know if my eyes are playing trick, but see these little notches out there? It almost feels like the struts get a touch thinner out here at the edge as they are above my fingernail. So down here closer to the edge of the prop protection, it looks a touch thinner. So if we have breakages, that's where I expect them to be, because it's the same way all the way around each one of those spurs. I'm calling them spurs, supports, whatever you want to call them. If you were to damage a motor somehow, I wouldn't think it'd be very likely in this case. They are just connected through connectors, so you're looking at some screws to disassemble to where you can gain access to everything, take a motor out, and just plug it back in. If you have to repair or replace your HDZero, that's where you're looking at a bit of soldering, because it does not come with a connector, so you're going to have to learn to solder that in order to repair HDZero. That's probably the biggest downside to getting into this with HDZero, is that the VTX does not connect just directly. But that's not, even in analog versions of this, the VTX is not connector based, it's still solder based. And even if they were to have a different HD video transmission system, it's probably going to be solder based as well. This one I don't even think would carry the DJI-03 unit, so that's something to be careful about wishing for. We do have adjustable camera angle. Inside, I was flying relatively flat about here. You could see the prop protection. Outside, I pushed it up a little bit to try to get some more performance. Well, fly with more performance. I needed to get the angle up a little bit. So we have those two screws on either side of the camera. We can loosen those up and then turn this, but as you can see, I can turn it without turning the screws, just in my hands. As far as how they have everything assembled, it's fine. I don't have a problem with it. The nice thing about USB-C is it seems to be a little bit more hardy than micro USB. Of course, it weighs a touch more than micro USBs as well. So it comes with a USB-C cable that you can use should you need to connect it to a computer. No worries there. It does use a rubber band to hold the batteries in, so you got two of those. If you do have to replace those, you have to take these screws out in order to get well, at the very least, the front and the back, in order to get another rubber band in there. My kit did have one extra rubber band. I think it's supposed to have two, so something else. I touched on it a little bit. I talked about it more in my other video with the Freestyle 3. The HDZero connector is going to be a limiter, and we know that through enough connections and disconnections and enough flights that over time this is going to wear down. Whether that's 40 flights or 140 flights, we don't really have a measurement for that, but we do know these wear down. And then you'll notice your performance goes down as well as your flight time goes down. Something else that is an indicator of that is when you arm the quad and take off, you get up off of whatever your surface is, you'll see that the voltage goes down pretty dramatically. So something to note when you first get it is kind of look at that drop in voltage when you lift off versus, down the road a month or 2 months or however many months when you get a number of flights in. If that number becomes larger and larger, that's an indicator that this connector is wearing out. The HDZero connector, while better than PH 1.25, which we did use for a time on our micros, we now have BT20, we have G&B's A30. They're both much better connectors. They are rated for a higher level of current, as well as they don't break down nearly as much. Matter of fact, I haven't heard of people replacing those two alternate connectors because of performance or battery sag issues. One other thing I thought about, but I don't know how much of a concern it really should be, but with it being a beginner quad, I do worry about this antenna and our crashes and coming in upside down and folding this down. But my concern was when that folds down, does it pull here? But as you can see, hopefully you can pick it up, that as I fold this antenna down, this does not appear to be moving. This is connected with a UFL connector, which is a particular kind of connector it's round on both ends, and it just kind of press fits over the top, kind of snaps together. So one of my initial concerns out of the box was with this routed through the hole, that as we crash and we come down on this antenna, is it pulling and pulling and pulling? I don't think that's the case, because I don't see it moving. I just see it flexing at this end. So I don't think that is actually pulling on the connector. You may want to take a touch of hot glue or something and put it around this area if that gives you a little bit of comfort. Don't get too thick with that hot glue, and hot glue does pop off, so you may have to reapply it after some sort of crash or something of that nature. So if you apply it, just be aware of that. This connector, while it's I've already stated my opinion on that. We also have kind of an extension on the heat shrink here, which limits our flexibility. With batteries such as this, with a little battery lead on it, it's not a big deal because you just you get the battery in there like this, and then you loop the two around, you connect them up just fine. So if you want to run stick batteries, it's not really viable because this isn't long enough. You're not going to be able to loop it around. You would either have to make a little HDZero connector extension, or just use batteries with leads on them, because when you set them in here, the connectors are real nice and close with each other. So that's the Tinyhawk 3 HD, a very kind of mediocre performer when it comes to quads, but I think it's probably appropriate if you want to be cautious as a beginner. I think in this particular kit, the most exciting part is the goggles and the cost that you end up paying for the goggles. You can use these on other HDZero and Express LRS quads products of various sorts. If you're primarily going to be flying outside, I would highly encourage you to watch the video on the Freestyle 3 HD. I've got that, and I'll link that down below. That's a fairly long video, as this one might be as well, but this one performs quite a bit better. It's still not such a high performer that you might get out of control and in trouble and damage not only the quad, but maybe the property that you're flying around or people. It's still fairly modest performer when it comes to micros. It also has an option for a base plate to where you can run 3-inch props, which will probably give you longer flight time. As props get bigger, we generally get more efficiency. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll get more performance, but if you're out doing flat exploratory sort of cruising, you'll get more flight time, is my opinion on it, my guesstimation on that, just based on efficiencies. Again, this kit is $279.99. The Freestyle kit is $289.99. I'll have links to both down in the video description below. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching.